Hello again, Daniel here, making history. I am consolidating all of my notes and stuff. And so as I've been setting that up, I've been reviewing some of the notes that I've written over time, and I came upon this one that I don't think I have actually posted to Making History yet, so I thought I would. And one of the other things that I'm doing is I am noting all of the things in my vault that I have posted to Substack, and I'm going to create a linked web on Obsidian Publish that my contributing subscribers can use to kind of see the links and follow threads of ideas more organically, because Substack doesn't really lend itself to that. In any case, this post that I wanted to talk about today is about what's called the affect heuristic. And the affect heuristic is a bias in which judgments and predictions or decisions are, quote, guided directly by feelings of liking or disliking. And this is according to Daniel Kahneman in his 2011 book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Kahneman attributes the discovery of this to Paul Slovic. And the strength of our feelings, he says, often determines the intensity of our commitment to a decision. He also says that the affect heuristic is often used as a substitution when it's easier for us to answer, how do I feel about this, than how do I think about this. Kahneman notes that the affect heuristic is especially common in politics, where he says we tend to go with our gut, and in his words, the positions we favor have no cost and those we oppose have no benefits. Kahneman goes on to say, the dominance of conclusions over arguments is most pronounced where emotions are involved. He also suggests that in most cases, the more rational, deliberative part of our mind, which he calls System 2, operates as an endorser of conclusions come to using System 1, based on affect rather than reason. The self-critical role that System 2 could play is often pushed aside in favor of what he calls a search for information and arguments that is consistent with existing beliefs, not with an intention to examine them. I've always been curious about the difference between the reasons for actions and the rationalizations that people make after the act. This is one of my perennial beefs, actually, with political historians, who I often suspect are not really thinking seriously enough about the difference between what politicians and parties say and what actually motivates and directs their actions. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether this is a distinction some historians don't see, or whether these historians think it's a distinction without a difference. But my reading of especially popular political history suggests that the way patriotic stories of our past are presented to the general public and taught to school children has a lot to do with the affect heuristic. Kahneman takes for granted that the strong feeling, the affect, that is influencing our perception can be either positive or negative. But it seems like this is worth digging into a bit more. In Why We're Polarized, Ezra Klein said that in the last 50 years, we Americans, quote, became more consistent in the party we vote for, not because we came to like our party more. Indeed, we've come to like the parties we vote for less. But because we came to dislike the opposing party more. Even as hope and change sputter, he said, fear and loathing proceed. He wrote this, of course, in the Obama years, but it may be especially true in the Trump era as well. In both cases, it's interesting to think about those eras maybe as a result of this cause rather than as a cause of this result. And I suspect a negative affect heuristic explains a lot of the politics and the culture war that we saw even in the more seemingly calm and professional early years of the Biden presidency. Also, recent attempts by demagogues to redefine critical race theory as an anti-white program to teach K through 12 school children that being white makes them criminals, or at least makes them complicit. All this seems to be based on an expectation that most of the people hearing the phrase for the first time and having no idea what it means will be easily guided by affect to allow these demagogues to fill the term with their own meanings. Affect applies in several ways in this instance. For example, regular people generally dislike and distrust academics. Members of a white majority that's losing its majority status, especially in the big cities, fear that decisions that will be made in the future might be made against their interests by a new multiracial or multicultural majority. And this sort of begs the question, were most of the previous decisions that the white majority had made overtly racist? Things like redlining? Or did most of them just structurally advantage the majority in subtle ways? That's actually the main claim of CRT. So it's easy to see why it's so challenging to the status quo. Either way, though, it's easy to let a feeling, affect, guide our responses rather than a sincere willingness to entertain the question. And Kahneman says that the way the affect heuristic works, our rational minds may then create a rationale for that response when the reason for the response was the original negative emotion, the affect. This is one of several heuristics that I would like to spend more time exploring with my students sometime in the future. I'm curious to see whether having a name for it will encourage some students to question their own responses. We deal with a lot of controversial issues already, and often my students tell me at the end of a semester, "I can't believe I never learned that before in school." And this has actually even prompted a few to want to be historians, which I think is kind of cool. I wonder, though, whether students who aren't predisposed to a little bit of skepticism regarding the powers that be, these are the type of students who become historians, whether the ones who don't feel that way might be turned off and alienated, or might have difficulty hearing a story that doesn't fit their worldviews. I feel like I can maybe help to make some space for them to consider challenging information by showing that I'm not merely critical in one direction, but critical in general. And also, hopefully, by trying to be likable and seem fair. This is affect again, but this time I'm hoping that a positive feeling about me will allow students to be more open to challenging ideas. As I said, I'm going through all my notes and I'm putting the ones together that have already been on Substack, and I'll be publishing that out as a web of all my 1,500 plus Substack posts. But that's all for now. So I hope you found this a little bit interesting. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you again very soon.